Behind every successful endeavor in life is a relationship built on trust. Welcome to The Trust Doctor, restoring trust and enriching significant relationships. A podcast focused on helping you nurture healthy relationships. Join thought leader and world-renowned expert on relationship and empowerment coaching, Dr. Patty Ann, and her special guests every week for insightful and meaningful conversations filled with great takeaways that will help you build healthier business partnerships and happier romantic relationships. Are you ready to restore trust and enrich the significant relationships in your life? The Trust Doctor, Dr. Patty Ann, is in.
Welcome to today's podcast episode of The Trust Doctor, restoring trust and enriching significant relationships. And we have an amazing and incredible and unbelievable guest for you today. But before I introduce you, make sure you like, share, comment, and subscribe to this podcast. So today's guest is a man that gets it done no matter what. That's right. Hashtag no matter what. He is an author, investor, entrepreneur, and an internationally renowned keynote speaker. And he goes around the world helping people achieve their dreams by pushing them outside their limits, by pushing them above what they believe they can do outside their limited beliefs. So buckle up, because Sterling Hawkins is about to take us for a ride. Welcome, Sterling, and thank you so much for being our guest today.
Patty, thank you for having me, and thank you for such a generous introduction. It's great to be with you.
You're welcome. I mean, you give me the material. All I'm doing is sharing it. So
well, I have to tell you, listening to it back, I'm like, it sounds great. It doesn't feel that great every day doing it, but such is life, you know?
Well, you know what? Let's go right into that, because it sounds great when people say all the great things they want to accomplish, but it's not feeling so great when you have to push yourself outside your comfort zone in order to achieve that. So
Totally.
Help us, let the listeners hear your words of wisdom from what not only you say, but you do, because anybody can say it, right? You actually do it, like Mr. Extreme Sport, pushing, getting comfortable, being uncomfortable. So
that's right. I would say it's a mountain with no top. You know, we never reach a point where we're no longer uncomfortable with anything. Maybe a couple people throughout history have gotten there, but certainly not me. And you know, it's kind of ironic.
They must have died young, those guys. Like I'm thinking Alexander the Great, right? I mean, I think he conquered the world before 30, and then he died of like syphilis or something, like really young. So
yeah, it must have been. But it's ironic, because I got to this place from a place of not wanting to go outside my own comfort zone. You know, a lot of people are in my line of work, writing and speaking, because they've taken a company public at some astronomical valuation, or they've climbed Everest on their hands and knees, or some incredible human feat, right? I got into this, started pushing past my own comfort zone, because I've been incredibly humbled in my career. I started out an entrepreneur, still an entrepreneur to this day, but started a company with my father back in, I think it was early 2000s, and we sold it to a group in Silicon Valley.
Oh man, the family businesses, those get complicated. But anyway.
They do. And that's a whole other story, but we ended up selling it.
Well, you know, I do a lot of work with business partners and family businesses, because all the relationship stuff, you know, if you think it's hard to run a business with a partner, try running one with your family and throw all that
totally
specialness into the mix, we'll just say.
Well, you'll appreciate this. Then I grew up a 5th generation retailer. So 5 generations of my family were in the supermarket business.
So you really were off the boat? Like everybody says that they came over on the Mayflower, your family really did? I'm doing the math.
Yeah. No, but really, my dad's side of the family has been in this country, the U.S., really since the beginning. I mean, we've done some of those family trees back when I was in 2nd grade or something, and it goes really back almost to the Mayflower, not quite.
Where are you from? I mean, where's your family from? Where's your family from?
Family's mostly English.
Wow. So you came over like right after the revolution-ish time frame?
Yeah, it's somewhere in there. It's very, very early. And then on my mom's side, I've got a little bit of Ukrainian, a little Polish, Italian, and French, I think is.
So you're a classic American. You're a mutt.
That's right.
Like most of us.
That's
Awesome.
right. I've become
We
a
get the
melting
best of
pot.
everything. We get the best of everything, right? Okay.
I think so. So it was growing up in that family business. My dad and I got together.
So what was it? The retail, you said grocery store? Is that what you said?
Grocery store.
Did they own grocery stores or they worked in them?
No, we owned a grocery store.
All right. So like you're probably some famous billionaire, which I never heard.
No.
A&P, Gristedes, like what's the store?
No, it was called Green Hills.
Green
It's
Hills.
still in upstate New York. It's still owned not by my immediate family, but extended family members.
Oh, cool.
And it was a phenomenal place to grow up because, there's food everywhere and the store was kind of a fun place to be until I turned 15. And my dad was like, now you're going to learn what it's like to run this store. Welcome to the night crew. And I'd be up at like 10 p.m. going into work as everybody else is leaving and the store shut down. And there's this saying in retail that retail has got to be in your blood. And I don't know if it was born into my blood, but my parents certainly made sure that it was pushed into my blood through some of that early work.
Well, actually, though, it's seriously, when your family came over, being in the supermarket business, I mean, we take it for granted, but food is so essential. And so many people early on in the States died because there was no food or the crops. So you are really an essential part of the community. So
it really was.
Sounds like people don't realize that now, right? Because we have 27 grocery stores and back then, not so much.
Yeah.
So my guess is your dad had you cleaning the floors and all that, like the real grunt, like nothing glamorous that nobody sees.
Exactly. I mean, I was brought up in a way where I had to do the jobs that nobody wanted to do to show that, just because we're part of the family doesn't mean you get off lightly. You have to work harder. And it's funny because prior to the grocery store, they were actually in the farming business and they were raising cattle and milking cows and farming
Hard
corn.
workers. So, you come from tough stock.
Very, very tough stock. And it's funny. I think just around the pandemic, grocery stores, especially in the beginning, once again, kind of became the center of their neighborhood. And people started to realize again, wow, this is a really important component of my life. We all need food to live. And so that was kind of the background that I grew up in, being very food oriented, community oriented, people oriented. And it's
so do
nothing
you know,
but served me.
I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but it's my podcast. I can say whatever I want.
You may.
Right? So where we are I'm in Connecticut. We were talking, I'm a native New Yorker. You could tell from the King's accent here, but there's a family. I gave a speech somewhere in Westchester, and there was a family there called the Chicos.
Okay.
And they're very much, they're like a high-end grocery store, like very high-end, but they're family run, family owned, and they're very much an integral part of the community. So it still exists. It still exists out there is my point.
It does. It certainly does. But being a young guy right out of college, and this is right as grocery stores really getting more into technology. My dad and I got together and built a software company that we
And what's
sold.
the time frame?
This is probably mid 2000s, early 2000s. I graduated in 2004, and it was right around then. Okay. We built some software and sold it to a group in Silicon Valley where it became part of like an Apple Pay before Apple Pay. Okay. It was a fingerprint sensor that sat next to all the credit card terminals. And well, it worked just like Apple Pay, except you didn't need your phone. You just put your finger down and all your credit card, loyalty cards, all of that would come up.
I do think I remember using that. I really
Is that
do.
Right?
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
I mean, ancient. I'm as old as dirt. So
no. We know that's certainly not the case. But we did get really big. People looked at this thing and said, "Oh, biometrics is the future. We'd like to invest. We'd like to roll this out." And so we went on to raise $550 million, multi-billion-dollar valuation, 700 employees, offices all over the world. And it just felt like this meteoric success. And as a young guy, mid-20s at the time,
living the dream.
I'm living the dream. Like, this business thing is easy, right? I'm going to buy an island.
Can you say what it was called? Can you say what the company was called?
It was called Solidus Networks.
Okay. Hey, give it a shout out, even if it's been sold a gazillion times over or whatever.
Well, it's actually not a very good ending. It was a blast for a while, but
wait, you were buying an island. Take us back to that.
I was, I'm on this trajectory and, it's nothing but up. And then there were some missteps and then the housing market collapsed, 2008, 2010, somewhere in there. And our funding dried up and we didn't have enough organic growth to sustain it. And it's really a sad story of the whole company fell apart. All $500 million that it was invested into it is gone. We licensed, sold a few patents for pennies on the dollar. But what I didn't realize is how much of my identity was wrapped up in that company and how comfortable I was living that kind of life in terms of, I know who I am. I know what success looks like. I know how successful I'm going to be. And when it crashed, I totally crashed as well.
Okay. So to give us a little bit more detail on that, what do you, because that could mean so many different things to different people. Like, what did that look like, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, not at all. I mean, it's really how I open up the book, because I wasn't looking for discomfort at the time. It found me. And when the company went bankrupt, of course, I no longer had a job, but eventually I run out of cash. I go from this big, beautiful penthouse in downtown San Francisco, floor to ceiling windows, looking out over the Bay Bridge. Like, it was just an iconic place, to my parents' house, which is not a good look in your 30s.
Yeah, well, was it the basement? Was it that bad?
Well, maybe it was even worse. So they no longer lived in the house that I grew up in. They had a new home. And so I was in this kind of empty guest room. And I remember pulling in with my suitcases and a couple of boxes. And it was around then my girlfriend broke up with me as well, just to make sure I was like fully living out this sad story of a country
feeling
song.
Like crap, fully feeling like totally useless, rejected.
Like,
no one has any use for me.
This thing, I'm like, check. What else could happen to me? And, is that first night laying in bed, I'm staring at the ceiling. I'm in something like 6 figures of personal debt. And I make this personal declaration to myself. I say, despite this failure, despite what I'm up against, despite the unknown that I've been really thrown into, despite all of this discomfort, I'm going to do something. I don't know what yet, but I'm going to do something with 3 words that have become very special to me, no matter what. And that really started my journey back.
Okay, so hang on. And you did reference a book. So for the listeners, don't worry. We're definitely going to get to the book. But I'd rather, there it is. Hold it up, and I'll share it. It's Hunting Discomfort.
That's right.
Wow.
That's right.
All right. We'll talk more about that later.
We will.
But I want to ask you a question. You said, and I've heard this before, people will say, I'm laying in bed, like, the world is collapsing in around me. Mm-hmm. And something clicks and I make that promise, right? To you, it's like, no matter what. But tell us more about that. Like, what was it about you in the past? Were you like a unbelievable athlete or a musician? Like, what within you were you able to fall back on and pull forward? Because I'm not saying that you're not telling the truth. I know you are, but you don't just decide, no matter what. I mean, my whole world is collapsing. My girl left me. I thought she was the love of my life. Right?
Yeah. Well, I think there's 2 aspects of it. One is, like we talked about, I've got roots of very hardworking people. Mm-hmm. They've got a lot of grit and they get things done. And, I'm sure subconsciously they've said many times over, like, go do it no matter what, like clean the floor, work all night, whatever it is, like you've got to do it.
You said your family did farming, no matter what the weather is, you got to figure it out.
Exactly. All right.
So that generational thing, which I do believe, right? We carry that with us.
And the second component is that it wasn't like it wasn't a hashtag. It wasn't something people were wearing on t-shirts. It wasn't like, I was like, oh, now I'm going to share this with the world. It became a very personal mantra, frankly, just to get myself out of the bed in the morning. Mm-hmm. It wasn't something like, oh, I'm going to build this brand and I'm going to, create this movement. It was, Sterling, tomorrow, you're going to get out of bed when your alarm goes off at 7:00, no matter what. And you're going to make that phone call to the people you're supposed to send money to, no matter what. You're going to send that email. And it was just something that I used, not even big things, but just to put one foot in front of the other, just to keep me going.
So it was a lifesaver. It was a lifesaver for you.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. So you're putting one foot in front of the other. You're getting up and getting out. And how'd you get down? What was the road?
Well, so my mom said this thing when I was a kid, and it came back to me in the weeks and months I was at her house. She said, the way out is through. I don't know if you've heard it. It's Robert Frost. To me, it's
when you're
always
going
my
through
mom.
hell, you just keep going. I think that was Winston Churchill. It's the same thing, right?
Yeah, it's a very similar idea.
Mhm.
And I said, okay, if that's true, let me just test this out. Like, what do I have to lose? I have no money. I'm living at my parents' house. I'm single. Let's go for it. The
Mhm.
thing that I am most scared to do at the time, believe it or not, was public speaking. Speaking in general, like just having a conversation with a couple of people would have been intimidating to me, not to mention on a stage somewhere. Because as I said, like I was so caught up with my company identity when things were so successful. I was embarrassed of everything that I lost and felt a lot of shame about, well, who was I supposed to be now? Because I wasn't all those things that I had at one time. And it was almost
So you
like
define yourself by your work as opposed to who you really are.
I did at the time, for sure.
Yeah. Mhm.
And it was like the stars aligned or the heavens opened up. I don't know what it was, but right then my email dings and I get a junk email from a conference in Singapore, one that you receive hundreds of a day. It wasn't inviting me specifically. It was saying, hey, come to our conference in Singapore. And I said, okay, if the way out is through, I hit reply and I said, why don't you have me speak? Best, Sterling. And I end up getting on the phone with the conference director, series of conversations. I tell him, hey, here's the experience that I've been through. I'd like to share some of the missteps that we made from your stage. And I kid you not, he hired me as the keynote speaker of their conference.
With no speaker reel, no speaker brochure.
No website, no credentials of any sort other than, the experience that I had had. And maybe it was one of those things when you've got nothing to lose, you've got everything to gain, right? Like I literally had nothing to lose. So I'm like, let's go after this. And I practice.
What if he says no? So what? Everybody else just said no. Who cares?
Exactly. And it wasn't like I was responding to a lot of emails. It was literally just this one. And I talked to him and it felt almost a little bit like it was meant to be.
Sure.
And I signed the paperwork. And as soon as I signed it, I'm like, Sterling, what did you just do? Like you have no right to get on a plane and speak in front of those people. Like you don't know what you're talking about. You've just had a massive failure. What do they want to hear from you?
Okay. So what was the time lag between when you signed that? How much time did you have to prep is the real question.
It was a little while. It was 3 or 4 months. It was a significant amount of time. And having not much else to do, I obsessed about this and wrote the speech over and over again and practiced. I wouldn't be kidding to say thousands of times, adjusting things, reworking the deck. And I know there's this saying that a lot of people have adhered to, like the more you practice, the less nervous you're going to be. That did not work for me. I was terrified. Like days before the conference, my heart is beating out of my chest. I remember walking on the plane, just like sweating profusely. I'm so scared.
Are they flying you business class or first class?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Sure,
well, business class. Yeah. And I'm like, what are you doing? and
I have another glass of champagne.
Yeah, right. No, I was on the plane reviewing my notes and going through it again in my head. Like I was obsessed with this thing, probably, I'm sure, over the top. And it's a good thing I practiced so much because when they called me up to the stage, I'm pretty sure I blacked out. Like the world started spinning and I got really hot and I delivered something for the 35 minutes or so I talked. And I get off the stage and Patty Ann, I thought I bombed. I really did. I thought they were going to ask for the money back or something. And I'm kind of covering my eyes as I get off the stage and the conference director is making a beeline for me. I'm like, oh no, here it comes. and he looks at me. It's one of the most surreal things that has ever happened to me. He looks at me and he goes, Sterling, that's the greatest talk I've seen in my 17 years of doing this. To this day, I don't think he actually was in the talk that I gave. I feel like there's no way.
He should be a BFF, man.
Yeah. But what he did is he went on to put me in touch with all of his conference director friends. And I had these speaking engagements all over the world. I was like, no way, my mom is right. The way out is through. And I just need to commit to going through no matter what. And what I'm looking for is on the other side.
So you know what? And I know this is not where you're going, but I'll tell you where I just went in my brain when you said that. Because you practice so much, it's like anything else. You had that muscle memory.
Exactly.
So even though you were blacked out, you were on automatic.
Totally.
And not being uptight about it, though, it was probably even more natural because if you were present, you might have held yourself back. Not that you weren't present, but like it's like you're holding on too tight. You just loosen up a little bit. I know whenever my notes like get blacked out, I crush it because I'm more authentic. I'm real.
Well, and I think there's something to that, actually, the discomfort of it. Like the more you go into that discomfort, the more you let go of your grip on how you want things to go, how you think things should go, how you need things to go. And that's incredibly powerful because it creates space for something new to arise, either new potential in yourself, new possibilities in the world, or new kinds of relationships. And so I found this research early on. It was at a University of Michigan. And they were studying discomfort specifically. And they were looking at different kinds of discomfort that people were experiencing, and they were scanning their brains. So they looked at physical discomfort, like you break a leg, for example, and then they scan that person's brain and say, okay, here's what their brain map looks like. And then they look at emotional discomfort. Oh, this person maybe lost their job or went through a tough breakup, whatever it is, and they'd scan their brain. And what they found is mind-blowing. No matter what kind of discomfort the people were feeling, the brain and body processed it almost identically. So much so that they found that if you take Advil, it will help your emotions feel better. You believe that? I'm not recommending that, by the way.
Oh, no. Of course. Listen, you're singing my song. I so much, but like the mind-body connection, the base of the brain is connected to the top of the spinal cord. It's only the AMA within the last 100 years that has separated it. And functional MRIs now. Peak performers. But keep going.
Yeah. Well, so if our body and mind are processing discomfort about the same way everywhere, that means we can build our capacity to handle it by finding discomfort anywhere. I think about it like you go to the gym if you want to build your biceps, maybe. If you want to build your resilience, you want to build your ability to create breakthrough results, you hunt discomfort. That's the way to do it.
So say that you just said something before. I want you to repeat. If you can experience discomfort anywhere, you should look for it everywhere. What did you say?
The more you're able to deal with discomfort anywhere, the more you find it anywhere, the more you open yourself to it anywhere, the better you can handle it everywhere.
It's awesome.
It's a muscle. And, in this very uncertain world that we live in, especially these days, we've got pandemic, tech disruption, we've got supply chain issues, we've got people that are dealing with staffing problems, we've got all the uncertainty, the war in Europe,
war in Ukraine,
right.
That little thing over there.
It's an insane world, and our capacity to deal with discomfort is the only thing that's going to get us through. It's like you want to future-proof yourself, you want to future-proof your business. You better future-proof yourself by acclimating to discomfort. It's the only way.
Okay. So I'm probably going to take you off your talking points, but let's go here. If you want to play along.
Yeah, let's go.
So I stay away from politics. However, I think we've done children a huge disservice because we don't let them fail. So they don't even know what the first time a kid experiences discomfort is when they don't get into the college of their choice. And they collapse, like all hell breaks loose, right? They collapse, the parents collapse, like, wait, you mean my son isn't the best thing since sliced bread? Actually, no, he's a little moldy, but nobody wants to admit that, right? So you have that, but we're in a society now where not only are we not exposed to discomfort, right? Because that's really, what's education for? Two things. One, just to learn to critically think.
Yeah.
That's it. And two, to learn that you don't know everything, which makes you uncomfortable, right? So our educational system doesn't create the discomfort. And then you have social media that has allowed for the propping up of what you believe your truth to be. And if somebody even thinks about penetrating it, now you need a safe space. What is going on?
I don't know, but I will tell you that.
Tell me I'm wrong. Am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. I think we've forgotten how important discomfort is for each of us as human beings. I was looking at, I don't know how I came across this research, but I found some stuff from the 1870s. This guy, his name was G.A. Hansen, I believe. And it
was in the family grocery store's basement.
Right. Exactly. We found this guy and here's the research. I found it tucked away somewhere.
And that's the body. No, just kidding.
Well, you say that in jest, but the research was about leprosy, and leprosy, I think most people know is a very terrible disease, and it can be lethal in certain cases where, your skin deteriorates. In worst cases, people were losing limbs. It's not so much something we worry about today, but in the 1870s, it was front and center.
It's like a pandemic. I mean, right? Wasn't it like, or epidemic? I don't know what the right word is. It was a problem.
I don't either, but it was certainly something people were really worried about catching. That's why they made those leper camps and everything else. And people thought, oh, if you caught it, that's what happened to you. And this guy, he must have been super courageous because he started researching it, and he found that there was a bacteria, but the bacteria itself was not causing the body to deteriorate. What it did is that it eliminated the person's ability to feel pain, to feel discomfort. And when they couldn't feel bumping their arm or getting a scratch, it would get infected. They wouldn't tend to it. And that would eventually lead to their skin loss or limb loss or, all these terrible things. Discomfort is not something to be afraid of. It's something that orients us in the world, and it's absolutely necessary. Now, I think where we get in trouble is that we all have miscalibrated discomfort mechanisms. What is actually dangerous to us is not always associated with the appropriate discomfort. And we feel discomfort for things that are literally not dangerous at all to us. Somebody posts something on our Instagram account that we don't like. We might feel massive discomfort, but it's actually not correlated to a real risk of our body. And until we as individuals, as a culture, arguably as business cultures, which is part of what I do, properly orient to where you're feeling that discomfort, to what actually is, you're just lost without it.
So what you're saying is that you've seen, and I do agree with you on this, and it's also part of road rage, but that's a little different also. well, it is. Somebody cuts you off and you freak out. You're not really freaking out about being cut off, but you're disassociated from the source of the discomfort.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah. And when you're dissociated, you're just not interacting with reality, and then wonder why you don't get results.
Yeah.
It's pretty clear to me.
So how did you discover that? And how do you help people with that? Because, when you say it, it's like, oh, Captain Obvious, but most of us experience that. It's almost like the referred pain, right? My back is hurting me, but it's got nothing to do with my back. It could be I've gained 50 pounds or, something's going on with my knee and I'm compensating for it and it shows up in my back. So the disassociation happens, secondary pain happens all the time with the body.
Right. Well, and it happens in our lives and business too. It's exactly the same.
So how does that show up and how do you help with that?
Yeah. Well, most often people come to me and I'm talking about hunting discomfort and being in your discomfort zone. Right. And people are like, listen, Sterling, you don't know me. My business is doing this and it has all these problems. And here's my issues in my relationships. And here's my money issues. And here's all the discomfort that I'm dealing with. And my answer is very simple. It's the same to everyone. You're not hunting discomfort. You're living with it. And that's how most people spend their lives. And it's how most people run their businesses. And
so wait, differentiate that for the listeners. You know what you're talking about, but that's very profound. You're not hunting discomfort. You're living it.
That's right.
What's that look like? What's that difference?
Yeah. So hunting it would be to go after the source of this discomfort. Find what it is that's causing you that physical, mental, emotional, arguably even spiritual pain, and get to the source, the root of what that is. And once you find that, use my mom's advice, the way out is through. Open yourself to that. And as you do, you start to loosen discomfort's grip on you and you become free of it. When you actually hunt discomfort, you no longer feel discomfort. You're free. Now, most people do not do that, though. They will rationalize, they will placate, they will look for ways to maybe even medicate that discomfort because they'll explain away things like, well, that's just my personality, or that's just my luck, or I had that coming, or it's a pandemic, or of course, we're dealing with those kinds of competitors. And what they don't realize is that when they're triggered by those things and they're rationalizing them, that's just living with discomfort. And you'll be forever stuck if you live that way.
So thank you so much for that. That so resonates. And
Good.
it's interesting because, as I said earlier, talking about like high performing athletes, right? People think they're not afraid. They're like, no, oh no, we're afraid like everybody else.
Yeah.
But also part of everybody being a little off kilter, to put it nicely these days, right? And you see this in your work, is that we get an emotion and we do everything on God's green earth to avoid it, not acknowledge it, right? All that stuff. And what I tell people all the time is when you have a feeling, go into it, because as long as you avoid it, it owns you, it controls you. You're building your life around. I'm not going there because
You're speaking my language, Patty Ann.
Right. But if you go through, first of all, you have to know what it is. So you have to label it, right? You have to give it a name, or you don't. A lot of reasons for that, right? And then you go into it, and then counterintuitively, it dissipates. And it no longer holds its hold on you. But how do you do that? And how do you help people with that in business? I work with that with, the relationship piece, but how do you do that in your work?
Well, really all of a business is a makeup of people's mindsets, beliefs, views, and actions.
80%.
And then we start to look at things the same way. And, these things are okay to do in our business, and these things aren't okay. And that is what determines people's results. So when we're going to work on a business, we're actually going to work on the leadership of that business, or the different people that work in that. Exactly, right. Maybe I should say we go to work on developing the leadership in that business.
Right.
Because you're right. If the way out is through, the way through is to surrender to some of those deeper, darker, maybe more unpleasant emotions. Most people, I think these days, at least that I'm interacting with, want to achieve their ultimate potential. You could say that personally, professionally, in any sense of the word, they want to achieve a greater potential. And if you're denying discomfort, and whatever flavor that may come, call it pain, call it grief, call it anxiety, if you're denying that discomfort, you're ultimately denying a piece of yourself. And there's no way that you can achieve your potential unless you're using all of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like trying to win a race with one hand tied behind your back.
Right. Like, and you think about it like this, and it doesn't make any sense. But when you're triggered by something, or you're grief-stricken, or whatever it might be, it's a lot of your work. It's so easy to turn away from that discomfort because it's not pleasant. I'm going to go have a drink, or I'm going to zone out on Netflix, or I'm going to order food, or whatever it is. And don't get me wrong, I do it myself sometimes. But whenever you're turning away from that discomfort, you're really turning away from yourself. And inside the book, we've got 5 steps to walk people through the same kind of steps we do with companies. Do you want to go through them? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Would you please? The listeners are waiting with bated breath. Actually, so am I.
Well, the first step is the namesake of the book, is hunt discomfort. Many of us live our lives and operate our businesses in ways that are very cleverly contrived to avoid discomfort.
Oh, yeah. Right? We are smart when it comes to protecting ourselves, right?
And we might be doing it unconsciously. So it really does take some hunting to unpack, okay, where is
what's really going
discomfort?
On? Yeah,
exactly. And maybe similar to your work, we're going to have to chat more offline about this, is you get to the source of where did that discomfort originate and why do you feel it? Like, what happened to you in the past, guaranteed?
Well, a trauma.
Exactly.
And trauma, not huge trauma, but something that's not in sync with how you want to see yourself.
Yeah.
Gross, terrible description.
I think about it too as, it's just discomfort denied in the past. And if you deny it in the past, it's going to stick with you. So what is that? And that's really the first step of hunting discomfort. And the second step is something that I call getting a tattoo. Commit so deeply, there's no going back. And you can commit to a lot of things, Patty Ann, right? But there are 2 kinds of things to commit to. The first are finite. And this is the German-American theologian and philosopher Paul Tillich's work. 2 kinds of things that people can commit to, or that they're concerned with. The first are finite, right? I want to open up this many locations. I need this much money. I've got to pay rent on these days, like very specific things that happen at specific times. And we need to commit to those kinds of things. But what I suggest you commit to, and again, as part of the book, is the second kind of human concern that Paul Tillich talks about, which is your ultimate concern. Things like love, joy, gratitude, and peace, things that no matter what happens, they cannot be taken away from you.
And sounds like it's the things that really matter.
The things that ultimately matter. Exactly. When you look at your life, those are the things that matter. And when you bring those things that matter into your discomfort, you start to alchemize it and you start to get free of it. But it doesn't stop there, because we need some help, right? Doing this is a very difficult thing. And if you're doing it right, it can feel almost like you're dismantling pieces of yourself.
Sure. And that's scary, right?
Very well. Like, my identity was so tied up in that company. When the company crashed, I fell apart because I didn't know who I was. And, as you're doing this work, you might come across situations like that where you're like, well, if that's not true about me, or that's not true about the world, what is even true?
Right.
So we need people on our side to help. I call it building a street gang. Not because I'm suggesting somebody do anything unlawful here. I'm not, right? There are several things that this street gang is going to do for you, but maybe most importantly is they're going to hold you accountable.
Well, it's interesting what you said earlier, right? You need the accountability piece, and that's because you can't ask a blind person to see.
Exactly.
Right.
Right. In our minds, if our identity is being broken apart because we've chosen it or because it happens to us, we need somebody to kind of guide us through and keep us true to what we say we want to achieve, because there comes a point when things get really hard and you can't see it anymore. And there's every justification in the world why you shouldn't keep going,
right?
Except for this person. And when you're personally accountable, there's research in the book. I cited it. I forget where it's from right now, but you are 95% more likely to achieve whatever it is that you're committed to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, 95%, like, if you actually want to get something done, like really, truly in your heart, you better be personally accountable, because it's the only way to achieve it.
Well, and it's also, like if you want to change your behavior, and that's a whole other conversation, but
sure,
they say, if you tell somebody wants to stop smoking or somebody wants to go to the gym, tell everybody and anybody you know, because the day you feel like having that cigarette, or the day you feel like not getting your butt out of bed to go to the gym, chances are you're going to run into somebody that's going to say, hey, how's that going? And now all of a sudden you're like whistling past the graveyard, and it holds you accountable when you, for whatever reason, probably because we're only human, right?
Yeah.
Can't hold ourselves accountable, or do you want the people to be personally accountable? Because so much of coaching is accountability too.
Personal accountability, I think, is important. But if you're looking to grow, you need outside accountability, or you won't be able to do it. I think, if you want to sustain, maybe improve a little bit, kind of keep yourself on exactly the trajectory you're on, sure, self-accountability is fantastic.
Good. Okay.
But growth requires an outsider. And to your point, I don't think that's a totally different conversation. I think, take smoking, for example. Likely some habits like that are because you're numbing some kind of underlying discomfort. And as you can get to the core of that, and again, you'd use the same steps that are in the book, same step I work with companies on, you just do it at a personal level. You get to the core of what that discomfort is, then it's no longer trying to stop smoking. You've gotten rid of the discomfort, so there's nothing to cover up. There's nothing
and
to
for the
placate.
record, because Sterling is in Colorado, we're talking about cigarette smoke and nicotine.
That's right. We're not
talking
true.
about
and I should also say, like, I am not a doctor. This is only my personal experience. And
I am a doctor, and I do play one on TV, but not a medical doctor. No, but what you're saying, though, the correlation is so much of my coaching, and even with consulting, people will ask me a question. And, after 37 years of doing something, you pick up a couple of things, right? Or you're in the wrong line of business. But basically, I'll say to them, what's the real question?
Yeah.
Right. Because the first question we ask is probably the easy question.
Yep.
But then when I say that, they stop and they have to think. And I don't know how you feel about this. And I am science-based, I'm neuroscience, but I also believe in energy. Yeah. When you say that through Zoom too, you feel a shift.
Yep.
And I feel like that shift is some type of uncovering.
Totally.
But you could spend your whole time talking about the person wants to talk about. Why? because it might be a little uncomfortable, but not uncomfortable enough to avoid it. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, that's right on. I think, we all fall into this trap of looking at ourselves and looking at the world around us thinking, oh yeah, I've kind of got this figured out. I got a camera here and, I'm talking to Dr. Patty Ann and I've got a TV over here and some monitors there. And like, I've got this figured out. And
an awesome book.
Right. I've got this book. Like I know what I'm doing now.
Who's better than me?
Yeah. Well, I'm constantly humbled by this idea that when you look at the subconscious mind versus the conscious mind, what we're consciously aware of, the things that we think and feel and interact with, it's something like, I'm going to get the zeros wrong, but something like 0.00000045% conscious. And it's like, wow. That is humbling. Like what I see right now looks real. I think I can see, however you are, Patty Ann, on the screen. I see these things about
absolutely
my book.
Drop dead gorgeous. Come on.
No question. No question. But when it comes down to it, I'm seeing a very small, like almost nothing of what you are. I see almost
reality.
Next to nothing of the potential inside of yourself. And by that same token, I see almost nothing of the potential that's in me. Mm-hmm. And as we let go and as we go into that discomfort, I think of it, kind of like to your point, you get into that space of letting go of the easy answer into something that's greater than yourself. And you let that emerge.
Okay. So let me just go just a little bit deeper, if you don't mind. So having clinical psychologist, right?
Yeah.
So read Freud.
Yeah.
Two things that he was right about, only two. Unconscious. No, seriously.
I'll take your word for it. Yeah.
Oh, we never heard about the unconscious before him. It's not that long ago, right? And two, dreams. The saying is dreams are the royal road to the unconscious, because what happens is part of all our protections, all our defenses, all of that is sunsetted when we sleep, right? But to your point, I absolutely believe this. All behavior has unconscious motivation. Because to your point, most of what we're seeing is not all of what it's not really what's there. I didn't say that so well, and that's why you have to dig deeper, which I guess leads us to number 4. No.
Number 4. Well, just before that, when you're in the state of what you're committed to, be it committed to in the ultimate sense, love, joy, gratitude, those things, it opens up your mind, maybe more importantly, opens up your heart to other things that could be, other ways of being about yourself, other ways to see the world that you're otherwise blinded to. So we can put a pin in that and come back to it if you like. But step 4 is what I call flip it, right? We all run into challenges and obstacles and roadblocks, and there's all these problems in the world, especially these days. There is inherent strength in all of those things, if and only if we take the time to find it. I'll use a personal example. Back with that company, one of the things I was most embarrassed of was the failure itself. And instead of tucking it away, pretending it didn't happen, running from it, just trying to go somewhere else, I slowed down. I started to confront it. And what I shared from that stage were some of the missteps that we made. It was the failure itself. And in a very ironic way, sharing those stories, the things that I was literally most scared to talk about, have become a piece or a foundational component of any success that I might be seeing today. So it's like taking the problems, the obstacles that I thought I had, they became the reason or a strength point when I never thought they were. And there's tons of stories about that in the book.
Well, give us one.
Well, one of my favorites is, I don't know if you know William Hung. I had the pleasure of speaking with him at TEDx several years back, pre-pandemic. And this is the guy, you might know him when I tell you the story. He was on American Idol and he sang Ricky Martin's She Bangs so terribly that he went viral like overnight. Ring any bells? No?
I think I know who you mean.
I mean, it was probably a decade ago.
Was he like a pudgy kind of looking guy?
Yeah, yes. I think I want to say he's Chinese, of Chinese descent anyways. And,
I meant weight wise. I wasn't.
Yeah. I got it.
I don't want to offend anybody.
Adding to. I know we don't want to get canceled here, Patty Ann.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I don't know how I've gotten this far, but go ahead.
But I got to know him a little bit behind the scenes, getting ready for the TED Talk. And I had recalled seeing him.
Hang on a second,
Yeah.
Sterling. And I didn't mention in the introduction that Sterling is a TED Talk speaker. But when we're done, wait till we're done, you'll Google him and find out everything there is to know. Go ahead.
You're the best, Patty, and thank you. So we're preparing for this talk, and I'm getting to know him a little bit. And I'm recalling like all these places on social media, even on the news, where they're just making fun of this poor guy and how poorly he screwed up this song. And he was saying in those first couple of days after it happened, like he just wanted to crawl into a hole. And I'm like, right? I mean, the whole world is making fun of you. Of course you want to curl up in a ball and go home and, do whatever you do to get away from it. And he had a turning point that he talked about. He's got several great TED Talks getting into some of it, but he just embraced it. He opened himself up to it, and he kind of became a caricature of himself. And he made a record. He started selling out singing engagements around the world, believe it or not. He headlined Vegas show with Ricky Martin.
Was he really a singer and he just froze, or no? Like, what's the
No, he's not. I wouldn't call him a singer by any means. No.
Okay.
No, I think if you were to objectively look at his singing, most people with any singing background would be like, not that good.
Not so much.
Not that good.
Okay.
And he just embraced it and ran with it. And he's selling like thousands of records, and he's got all these views on
Who's
TED
got the last laugh, right?
Right. And I'm like, man, that is unreal. Like, you took the thing that maybe felt like your biggest failure. The whole world's laughing at you, and that's become your success. Like, how cool is that? And we all can do that on a personal level or at a professional level. It just takes looking for it, and more likely than not, letting go of some of your discomfort around it to do it.
So I'm just curious, was he able to do that similar to you when you said you had nothing to lose? Why not try? Did he feel like, well, it's already out there, I have nothing to lose? Like, what allowed him to embrace the failure and own it and then turn it around? Flip it, as you said.
Yeah. Well, if I'm recalling correctly, it was a conversation with his mom where she was just like, just go for it. Like, what do you have to lose at this point? You can live at my house if you need, but right. Like, you're here, you might as well keep going. I'm sure he's got more stuff online about it, but he's always been a person that I've really looked to be like, man, if he can do it, like news channels around the world were making fun of this guy, and he's come back to create this success, I can certainly do it. And all of us can.
It's actually similar to, they say, if you make a mistake or if something goes wrong, it's more egregious to cover it up or not admit it.
Totally.
Just own it, and you can get past it, because people are good at heart. We all know, we all make mistakes. What do we have in common? We're all not perfect. We all make mistakes, right? So
yeah. And as you own those things, that's really a method for flipping it. I think there's 10 or 12 things in the book specifically you can do, but owning it is absolutely key. And he's a great example. So we've done a lot here. We've hunted discomfort, gotten a tattoo, built a street gang, we flipped it. And now the last step, the fifth step, maybe the most important step, is if the way out is through, the way through is to surrender. And surrender is the fifth step. And I mean surrender in two ways. The first is surrender the time, materials, money, resources, whatever it is to achieve what it is that you're looking to achieve. And I think most people would know that. The second piece of surrender is maybe even more important, or is more important, which is to give up your resistance to any of that, to give up your resistance to the way things are, exactly how they are, and exactly as they're not. I love this quote from Carl Jung. I'm sure you know Carl Jung. Many of your listeners do.
Thank you. I finally got somewhere.
Right.
I'm feeling like a yin yang over here.
All right. Like, I feel like everybody knows Carl Jung these days. But he said, condemnation does not liberate. It oppresses. We can't change anything until we accept it. And I found that to be totally true. Until we can open ourselves up to accepting what is, it's very, very difficult to change it.
Well, because otherwise you're trying to change what's not reality. So
exactly.
If you're not dealing with reality, what are you doing?
Exactly. Yeah. And it really goes hand in hand with discomfort, because when you feel discomfort, the productive way to handle it would be to surrender to it, open to it. As you were saying earlier, feel whatever it is. And as you do that, you're free of it. And as you go through those 5 steps over and over again, it's not like a mountain you summited. It's like a mountain with no top. And you continually go through it. And you end in a place where you are living with less and less discomfort. And you become actually free.
But you have to still hunt it.
You do. You do.
It's always there. So I think, I love this. Like,
Thank you.
Love this. I have goosebumps. I know I need to get a life, but I do.
No.
I have goosebumps.
I'll take it as a compliment. I've been doing it.
Of course. But because I think I don't want to use a pejorative term like lazy, but I feel like we've gotten lazy and we don't want to be uncomfortable. And I guess as I hear myself say that, like, duh, what are you, sadist? Masochist? You want to be uncomfortable. But if you want to grow, right? All growth is in the discomfort. Yeah. Otherwise, you're just reinforcing what you're already good at. Now, I'd like to know what you think about this. So I feel I really believe this might sound harsh, but when we stop growing, we start dying. So if you're not embracing the discomfort, you're just accelerating your dying process. What do you think?
I would absolutely agree with that. I mean, you're perpetuating the status quo, and like where we started, many people, companies, I think very naturally just push away discomfort. Even if they're in very uncomfortable situations, they don't want to feel it. They don't want to go through it. And it requires exactly that to change results. I think about it. Yeah, I'm sure people are familiar with that idea of the phoenix rising from the ashes. And I hear it a lot, especially with a lot of the entrepreneurs that I work with. They're like, I'm going to be the phoenix rising from the ashes. But mostly what they're talking about is I'm just going to not stop doing what I'm doing. Okay, important. But more important is the burning part, which is burning the values, ethics, beliefs about your identity, about the company, how you see others, and how you see the world that are no longer working. Unless you're willing to sacrifice those, you can't actually rise.
Well, what happens is I think people, when they start a journey, they become committed or married to the outcome. And I think that can be an obstacle.
Yeah. Well, and I would say not just the outcome, but married to who they are to achieve that outcome. Not realizing that to achieve that, they have to become a different person, and they're going to see themselves and others and maybe even the world in different ways. And it's necessary to achieve that next level. I think the big changes in the world don't come from the actions. They come from a change in viewpoints. And when you change your viewpoint, again, it's always about one of 3 things: about yourself, about another, or about the world. New actions automatically flow from that. And that's where the real power is.
What about how you relate to the other and you relate to the world?
How do you mean?
Well, how change comes about: yourself, others, and the world.
Yep.
What about adding in that interactional piece?
Yeah, I think that's totally a component of it. I think of our beliefs or our perspectives kind of like lenses and glasses. And, I wear glasses, and when I put my glasses on, it changes what I see for the better. If you put my glasses on, you couldn't see anything because they're like Coke bottles, Yeah. But just contacts, like lenses, beliefs change what you see. The other component of it is that I'm not taking off my glasses on a regular basis to examine the lens itself, right? I'm just assuming, what I see is what I see, and that's correct. And that's the power in getting in the beliefs, where you actually step back from the actions you're taking and the views you have. You examine the underlying views, perspectives, and beliefs that you have. And when you change those, it's like changing the prescription in your glasses, where it's like, all of a sudden, how I see you, how I relate to you is naturally totally different because I'm looking at you differently.
Yeah, and it's interesting. And also that goes to, truth is not objective. It's subjective based upon your life experiences and the perspective from which you're viewing something. But we get so committed, and identity is to the truth as we know it now, that we can't even see somebody else's truth And I think that accounts for a lot of the noise in the world and a lot of people, wanting to come away from not face the discomfort, right? Then you have a whole conversation about mindset. Well, let me just double down on what I'm good with, right? I'm born this way. I got the fixed mindset. Okay, that's great. And what are you going to do? Right? And then you go to the growth mindset, and now a whole new world opens up.
Yeah.
But I feel like as we're talking, where does the role of curiosity play in this journey?
Well, if we just stick with that lens analogy, it's wondering if there's another lens out there. Like, how else can something be?
What do you do if somebody doesn't want to even entertain that? That's where you go in, and if you're going to be uncomfortable, you might as well be uncomfortable going forward, right?
Yeah. So there's a very fine line there, right? Because somebody really has to want the results and to want to go through this process. You can't force it on somebody. And I certainly wouldn't force it on somebody. They have to say, I want to achieve this in my life, business, whatever it is. And only then can you start to push into that discomfort of people starting to change those lenses. And they might not want to change those lenses in a particular session or within a series of weeks or months, right? But what they've committed to, again, it's that commitment and accountability component that's so important. That's going to carry them through being able to do it.
Got it. Great. Okay. So I know we're running a little bit late, but do you have time for one question?
Yeah, shoot.
Okay. What is the last book you reread and why?
It's called The Presence Process by Michael Brown.
Gosh,
and I've been through it. Were you really?
Yeah.
It's a phenomenal book. It's about half talking about meditation and the power of presence, hence the title. And the second half are a series of 10 weeks of specific meditations that he has you go through. And I go through it on a regular basis. I've been through it 5 or 6 times now, and I've reread the book 5 or 6 times now, because every time I go through it, I discover something new. I discover something that I've been rejecting or discomfort in myself. I find something every single time. And I think it's just the most profound thing. And his book has been very helpful in terms of me getting through the pandemic and opening myself, or maybe, as you would say, imagining other ways for me in the world to be, or for me to view the world, better said.
There you go. All right. I lied. One more question.
Yeah.
What's the most important thing you've learned about life that you want all the listeners to know? The one most important thing.
I think the most important thing I actually learned from my grandmother when I was 13 years old. And she was a smoker, ironically enough, and had cancer and was passing away. And she was in our family room on hospice. And I'll never forget the conversations with her about how much she loved us, how important her experiences were, the things that she learned, things that she wanted to give us. And the way that she showed me to love and let go at the same time, I think, is the most important lesson that I've learned in my life. And I think people could grab onto and use in their own. When you can love and let go at the same time, not only do you have all the fulfillment in life, but you're not attached to the way things go. And it's just a great way to live. And I owe that all to my grandmother.
That is so poignant. Wow. Okay. So Sterling, how can people find out more about you? How can they get your book? How can you get them? Because everybody is chomping at the bit to get into to hunt their discomfort.
I love it. Thank you. So the book is on sale June 21st. You can find it anywhere great books are sold. You can also check it out at huntingdiscomfort.com. And if you're looking for me or anything about what I'm up to with speaking, working with clients, it's sterlinghawkins.com. And everything you'll need will be right there.
Great. And I have to tell you, I personally think it's a movie star name. Just saying. I love it.
It was my mom. When I lived in Los Angeles, people are like, did you change your name? I'm like, no, it was my mom. And I grew up with that name.
Okay. No, I didn't think it wasn't your name, but it sounds like a movie star name.
Thank you.
All right. So Sterling, thank you so much. And that concludes today's podcast episode of The Trust Doctor, restoring trust and enriching significant relationships. And as promised, Sterling took you for a ride today. So make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe to this podcast. And until next time, be well.
Once again, we've concluded another great episode of The Trust Doctor with Dr. Patty Ann. Tune in next week for more insights and advice on how you can create, nurture, and sustain healthy relationships. To find out more about the podcast, visit drpattyann.com/podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, and share. Until next time.